Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker. This is the 21st day of January 2024. You'll notice that I'm a little bit foggy today. What happened is we've had a cold snap here in Kentucky, and on Tuesday my car decided it wasn't going to work anymore, so I was going to have it towed to Cincinnati. The AAA guy came, and it took him an hour to figure out how to get the car out of the garage. And in the meantime, I was standing out there with him in the maybe 10-degree weather, and it did a number on me. And by the next day, I was in full-blown asthma, and this is the residual effect of some of that asthma. So I've managed to make it through so far, so I'm hoping this will go well. The scripture is from John, the Gospel of John, and my sermon title today is Jesus at a Party. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, of what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward said to the bridegroom, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk, but you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the writer of the Gospel of John says, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So today we're going to explore how it is that I like to do biblical studies, and that is to find out everything we can possibly find out about this passage and what lies behind it, and try to gain understanding from that. At the end of the Gospel of John, we find a statement about why John is writing his gospel. And he says at the end of the 20th chapter, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these signs are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name." The first sign in John's gospel was Jesus turning water to wine. Cana was a small village, and it's possible that for this wedding, everybody in the whole village was invited, including Mary, Jesus, and the first few of his disciples. They were all considered appropriate guests because they lived there at that time. And if you're like me, you know very little about what a Jewish wedding would look like 2,000 years ago. Marriage took place at a relatively young age for Jews at the time of Jesus. Most rabbis proposed age 18 for men. Young women were married as soon as they were physically matured, approximately age 13 or 14. Marriages were usually arranged by parents, but there were exceptions, and arranged marriages were not usually forced on young people who had absolutely no attraction to or interest in each other. Nevertheless, the wisdom of the ancient world, and even in some places today, was that marriage was not about love and romance. It was about survival. It was not just individuals who were married, but families that came together in mutual support. I did lots of weddings in Berkeley, California before I came to the Midwest. And one of those weddings, or several of those weddings, were arranged marriages. And one that I remember, the groom called the church to make the initial reservation for the wedding date and time. And he said that the bride would not arrive until 10 days prior to the wedding. Would that be okay? And I usually met with the couple a month prior to the wedding date, but if that's what was going to work, after the bride arrived 10 days prior to the wedding, then that's what we were going to do. So finally, as the date grew closer and closer, the bride arrived, as did her family. She came from Australia. She and the groom had known that they were going to get married someday, since they were young. And they had written to each other, they were familiar with each other, and they knew what the plan was. Well, she, in the meantime, had pursued her education. She had a master's degree in something. She spoke 6 languages. And the groom, in the meantime, had come to the United States. He'd gone to Stanford. He'd achieved a PhD in electrical engineering, I believe it was. He was in his first year working for a major corporation. She, in Australia, turned in her resignation for the major corporation that she was working for. She flew into San Francisco. I met with the couple, very nice young couple. They both spoke perfect English. They were excited for the wedding to happen. They knew each other, although they had not even been on the same continent for much of that time. It was a very positive occasion for both of them. They were ready to proceed with what had been kind of decided for them long ago. As the day of the wedding approached, more and more family came from Taiwan. Both the bride and groom were of Asian descent. Bride's family came from Taiwan. Other of the groom's family came from Hawaii, from Australia, from New Zealand, from all over the world, actually, all arriving in Berkeley for this wedding. It was a family event. I couldn't see much wrong with it because it worked for both of them. It worked for the families. I didn't have a problem with it. They were good people. When the future bride in Palestine of 2,000 years ago, when the future bride had been chosen for a young man, either by his parents or more rarely by his own choice, there was a period of 1 year's betrothal. And during this time, the couple still lived apart. And we'll remember that this was the situation for Joseph and Mary. Protracted negotiations went on between the families as to dowries, etc. The groom or his family paid a dowry to the father of the bride, and the payment recognized the loss that the family of the bride was going to incur as a working member of the household left to be married. After the period of betrothal and all the agreements were made, the wedding could take place. At the beginning of the wedding, in the evening, the bridegroom, accompanied by his friends, went to fetch his betrothed from her father's house. He would wear particularly splendid clothing, and sometimes even a crown. A procession was formed under the direction of one of the bridegroom's friends, who acted as a kind of master of ceremonies, what we would call the best man. And he remained at the groom's side throughout the celebration, days long. The bride was carried on a litter and in procession, and along the way people would stop the procession and sing traditional wedding songs, blessings to the bride, that were largely drawn from the Song of Songs in the Bible. An example of these blessings would be, "Who is this coming up from the wilderness like a column of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and incense, made from all the spices of the merchant?" When the procession reached the bridegroom's house, his parents bestowed a blessing upon the couple from Scripture and from other sources. After prayers, the evening was for games and dancing. The bridegroom took part in these festivities, but the bride would withdraw with her bridesmaids and friends to another room reserved for her. The next day was the wedding feast, as it was 2,000 years ago in Israel. The bride, dressed all in white, was surrounded by her bridesmaids, usually 10 of them. She sat under a canopy, a huppah, perhaps constructed earlier by the groom. While traditional songs and blessings were sung and recited, in the evening the groom arrived. Although the exact words are not known, there seems to have been a kind of ritual dialogue between the bride and the groom. It may be recorded in the Song of Songs. The bride there says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers." And the groom responds, "Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one. Come with me, my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside. Show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely." Now that the couple were together, all the men and women also came together. Synagogue leaders blessed the couple, now together under the huppah. And after this came the evening feast. Later on that evening, the couple vanished and the marriage was consummated. The celebrations often went on for several days. The couple did not go on a honeymoon, but rather stayed with the rest of the wedding celebrants for the duration of the party. Back to Jesus at the wedding feast at Cana. We know the party had been in process some time because there was a strain on the wine supply. Why was Mary even aware of the possibility of a shortage of wine? Well, it seems, although it's only a guess, that perhaps she was close enough to one or both of the families of the bride and the groom that she would be aware of the logistics of the occasion. In any case, Mary is concerned that running out of wine isn't something any Jewish host wanted to do. Hospitality was a very important thing, and skimping on the wine just was not done. And so Mary announces the problem to Jesus. And Jesus says, "Madam, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." Well, this seems kind of strange, but we have to remember that the Gospel of John is written 100 years after the time of Jesus. All of the readers know how this story comes out. And so having Jesus kind of refer to later on in the story is not unusual. Some think that this statement refers to the celebration of communion in the early church, another occasion where you had to have enough wine. Mary is talking about a possible embarrassment to the hosts if the wine runs out, and Jesus, on the other hand, is making a veiled reference to his own death and of the body and blood of Christ as the elements of communion. Well, like a good Jewish mother, Mary ignores Jesus' response. And she turns to the servants and tells them, do whatever he asks you to. Well, we assume that Mary goes back to the party, confident that her son will fix the problem. And he does. There were 6 stone water jars, each holding between 20 and 30 gallons of water for the Jewish rite of purification. Before any eating or drinking, every good Jew would wash his or her hands, not just for the sake of hygiene, but also to symbolize coming to the feast or to any meal with a clean heart. Jesus tells the servants to fill these 6 jars with water. Now, these were large stone jars, and the water source was not a faucet in the kitchen. The jars had to be taken down to the village well to be refilled, and this would be an undertaking for at least a half a dozen, maybe a dozen servants, and it would take them at least an hour. When the jars are all filled to the brim with at least 180 gallons of water, Jesus tells the servants to take some from one of the jars and take it to the chief steward, that is the banquet manager. The manager tastes the wine and asks the groom why he has saved the good wine for when people are too drunk to appreciate it. Then the gospel writer says, Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Biblical scholars say that John had a copy of an early Christian manuscript called the Book of the Signs of Jesus on his desk as he wrote the gospel. Matthew and Luke also had other written resources on their desks when they wrote their gospels. Both of them had a copy of Mark, which was the earliest of the 4 gospels, and they also had another source on their desk. It was written, but it's been lost by now, but we know that they copied directly from this other source, which modern scholars call Q. So in the Gospel of John, the writer gives details of a number of signs that Jesus performed, that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. The water into wine at the wedding at Cana is the first of these signs. Back to Jesus at the wedding. We have to remember that Jesus enjoyed weddings and banquets and parties. His critics really were down on him for being a person who went to parties. He also wasn't too particular about partying with sinners, people who polite society didn't take too much credit in. Jesus also knew how to laugh. And he was a great storyteller. We know he told great stories. He was not the type to insist that people be serious and holy all the time. I'm sure he understood that there was a time to celebrate the landmarks of our human life. When it was time to give blessings to the bride and groom, I'm sure Jesus had a good one for them. And when it was time to dance, I believe Jesus was not standing on the sidelines. That's some of my biblical studies on that particular passage. God bless you. Take care of yourself. My wife is half convinced that I still might have COVID, so I'm taking a second test tonight. So take care of yourself. If you find value in this, pass it along. I appreciate that. Thanks. See you soon.